the 6th of March 2026. You're welcome to this morning's edition of AM 120. And of course, the final edition for this week. I am Oluwafunbi Bello. I'll be taking you through the Nigerian Tribune first. And on the front page is a story is on page 12. It says, gunmen wreak havoc in Ondo, Oyo, Kebbi. The writer says, disguised as vigilante men to kidnap 4 on Kishi Betty Road. Abduct wife, shoot husband in Ondo. Kill 2 police officers in Kebbi after attack on border post. We have rescued Igbeti kidnapped victims, and that's coming from Oyo government source. Tinubu governors other eminent Nigerians to grace Obafemi Awolowo Foundation 2026 Memorial Lecture today, and that story is on page 3. PRA, Nigeria upstream producers have failed to supply crude to refinery, and that's according to Dangote. That story is on page 5. Senate summons Kyari, ex-NNPCL officials, over 210 trillion naira alleged discrepancies, and that story is on page 4. Still on page 4, Google introduces Yoruba Hausa support for AI search in Nigeria. Still on the same page, SANU issues fresh threats over delay in renegotiation February salaries. And on page 21, we have Senator Dixon dumps PDP, joins NDC. Tinubu resolves OPL 245 disputes with any 15 years after. Unlocks 150,000 BPD of crude, and that story is on page 6. Our substantive drug case abuse, our substantive drug case against Abba Kyari still on course, and that's according to NDLEA as court acquit him of non-declaration of assets case. That story is on page 2. And lastly, on the front page of Nigerian Tribune this morning is a story on page 17. Scientists develop universal nasal spray vaccine against COVID-19, flu, and pneumonia. All stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Let's take some of the inside stories. Federal government shortlists Ekiti for AFDB-funded Agric Transformation Program, and that's on page 3. Moving on to business and economy, that's on page 6. Economic hardship. Inflation escalation looms as shipping companies increase charges, and that's according to the African Association of Professional Freight Forwarders and Logistics of Nigeria. Despite exploits, women marketers still have huge grounds to cover, and that's coming from NIMN president. Unveils plans to host Women Leadership Confab. Nigeria, Angola lead Africa's sovereign bond rally on $83 oil surge. All stories are on page 6. And on page 17, Emir of Ilorin, Akinwumi Adesina, Lord Obasanjo at 89. Rotary International organizes President-elect Learning Seminar. FEC approves gratuity for federal civil servants. Scientists develop universal nasal spray vaccine against COVID-19, flu, and pneumonia. On page 21, we have politics. Your government is incompetent, ADC tells President Tinubu. Ex-Bayelsa Governor Seriake Dixon dumps PDP for NDC. That's the Nigeria Democratic Congress. Ekiti 2026. Senate leader heads Governor Oyebanji's re-election bid. And still on the same page, insecurity. State police, whole society policing will save Nigeria, and that's according to Owosheni. All stories are on page 21. Taking some sports stories now on page 24. Pages 24 and 25. Akpobore wants Osimhen back in Bundesliga. CAF shift WAFCON to new dates. I prayed to score against Man United, and that's coming from Osula. He will be nominated for Fulham's Goal of the Month. Came to miss Gladbach game with injury. Tricky ties headline match day 29. And talking of the Nigeria League service. Finidis sure of Rivers United's league triumph. Ahmed Musa not thinking of Europe return. And we have Tornado's technical crew gets 3-match ultimatum. Middle East crisis, Premier League staff forced to hide in bunker. And that's it we have on sport. And on page 27, we have Kano Assembly begins Deputy Governor's impeachment. Gives him 2 weeks to respond to allegations. Nawaj, Power, Naptip decried rise in human trafficking, illegal migration activities in Ogun State. Emefiele, court warns prosecution to always do what is right. And lastly, on page 27, missile strike hits U.S. oil tanker in Persian Gulf, according to Iran. And still on Middle East, Iran envoy faults UN silence over attacks, says global security system failing. And that's all we have on Nigerian Tribune this morning. We'll be moving over to the Vanguard newspaper, where we have on the front page a story on page 14. It says, Nasarawa, Kogi, Benue in grip of terror. Residents review routes, transit camps. How border communities, forest corridors fuel attacks. Nasarawa border communities, major transit points for terrorists heading to Benue. And that's according to a farmer. Says relevant authorities cannot claim ignorance, accuses monarchs of conniving with criminals, misleading security agents. 14,318 survivors flood IDP camps. Kogi Forest, sanctuary for armed groups. And that's talking about insecurity. At that point where it says, accuses monarchs of conniving with criminals. We said it on the program, I think earlier this week, about monarchs, leaders, and heads of communities, living up to expectations in terms of security, knowing how and when to secure the people around them. It's safe to say people know, just as we've always said, just as, it has been established, even by state governors, talking about these criminals and people knowing where exactly they are, people knowing who they are. This is time for leaders, community leaders, monarchs, to live up to expectation, especially living up to their role, to their positions, and protecting the people. Moving on, we have on page 19, power crisis worsens as generation drops 11% to 2,898 megawatts. And this all blames poor gas supply. That story is on page 19. Kano Assembly begins impeachment proceedings against Deputy Governor. That's on page 9. Nigeria is poor because we celebrate looters. That's according to Peter Obi, still on page 9. And Tinubu prioritizes 2027 over governance. And that's coming from ADC. Senate summons Mele Kyari Ajia over others over unaccounted 210 trillion naira. That story is on page 8. Amend Electoral Act or will boycott 2027 elections. And that's coming from IPAC. That story is on page 5. And lastly, on the Vanguard newspaper this morning, we have a story on page 8. Middle East war spreads as Trump says he must okay Iran's next supreme leader. That's all on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. Moving on, taking some inside stories on page 8. We have Senate summons Mele Kyari Ajia others over unaccounted 210 trillion naira. First lady to governors' wives, empower grassroots. Tinubu oversee historic resolution of 15-year-old OPL 245 dispute. Tinubu promotes Masari as special advisor. Nigeria is poor because we celebrate looters, and that's coming from Peter Obi. Tinubu prioritizes 2027 governance, 2027 over governance, says ADC. And on page 14, we have Nasarawa, Kogi, Benue in grip of terror. Residents review routes, transit camps. That story, we have it from page 14 running through page 15. When truth and logic are defiled by ethnic emotions, and that's on page 16. Donald Trump, like Adolf Hitler, walks on both legs. That's on page 17. And moving on to business, we have power crisis worsens as generation drops 11% to 2,898 megawatts. Decline in textile sector persists as GDP contribution falls 3.6% in 2 years. 12 states have enacted tax harmonization law, and that's according to Oyedele. SEREC warned of risk posed by U.S.-Iran tension for African maritime. And on the back page where we have some sports stories, Saudi club tempts Onuachu with 13 billion naira offer. CAF postpones WAFCON 2026. We have Israel Adesanya wants $15 million for one fight. Babangida, Lukman plays a Mokachi-like role under Chell. And lastly, we have Serena is coming back, and that's according to Djokovic. And that's all we have on the Vanguard newspaper this morning. We'll be right back after taking the weather report, and of course, we head straight to our interview segment. Please stay with us.
All right, thank you very much for joining us right here on the interview segment of AM120 this morning. Well, the conversation is quite one important for us at this moment. We're talking about rising insecurity, and we are spotlighting certain areas. Yes, that's ISWAP's attacks on Yobe Market, Bono military bases out there. There's a lot that we already know, and yes, indeed, there's a lot more that we do not know. So what we're going to do this morning is to unpack everything that we know, analyze everything, and then also point out those areas that we are here to see alongside our guest who is well-versed in conversations like this. Our guest this morning is none other than, I would like to call him our daddy because of how he's been with us right here, a person of Mr. Fatai Akinsomi, legal practitioner and retired intelligence officer. You're welcome this morning, sir. Now we are talking about this conversation again that we are having, rising insecurity. At this point in time, maybe we should stop using the word rising and just accept that it is here with us for a while. Now, we have spoken about rising for quite a number of times. But what do you make of, this ISWAP's attacks on these areas that we have highlighted, especially from your experience as an intelligence officer?
Well, the bottom line is that there's widespread insecurity, whether called by code name ISWAP, whether bandit, or whichever names each of the attackers adopt at a particular time. But definitely, it's a worrisome situation.
But you say worrisome. We have had it for quite a while.
Yes, actually.
And it's almost like nothing has been done to stop this whole thing. What exactly is happening in here? Is there something that we are missing out? Because now the target is that Yobe market that we saw hit. We also saw the Borno military bases that were hit. Is there something that we are missing along the line? Is there something that we have not paid attention to?
Definitely. For example, in case of this IDP camp and the military base, normally those two places are expected to be more secured than any other place because it is manned. It is expected to be manned by armed military or security personnel. So, but the bottom line is that many of those who are in IDP, if they provide them, I'm of opinion that they will discover that some of those terrorists or those who have sympathy for them, they are also in ID camp.
Okay.
So who might be really relating the condition in the IDP camp to their colleagues who are outside. See this because when something like that happens, you have to look inward. There must have been leakage of information somewhere. The same thing, the military base. You know, the situation has gone so bad in the past years before that you will see some of these terrorists finding their ways into sensitive security establishment and being employed. So that's areas that we got it wrong. So they must have, if you have somebody who doesn't believe in your philosophy inside, then it's a danger to the establishment of that philosophy, of that establishment.
Okay, looking at what we read in the papers this morning, talking about the root of these attackers and some of these states that have been under siege for a while now, some people were actually saying or accusing monarchs of conniving with criminals. It says, accuses monarchs of conniving with criminals, misleading security agents. When we see monarchs, leaders, community leaders who are supposed to protect the people causing havoc in the community, what exactly do they stand to gain?
You see, if those are in the position of authorities, even including the monarchs, if they are doing their responsibility, the society very well, the society will not be like this. So that you are talking about criminals, it's not limited to a segment, it's just limited to groups. So it can, even if you are the head of the village, you have seen instances where the head of the villages also are also part of those who are terrorizing their territory. So I don't think it's a new phenomenon, but it's, as I said earlier, it's also worrisome. when you is expected to take care of your people, you are the same person who are using the life of those people for your betterment. But it's happening.
Well, now we are talking about some more attacks. Just yesterday, there was increased tension in the air. Why? Because Kishi Betty was also hit, and there are questions around what exactly is happening now. For those who do not know, Kishi and Igbeti are a part of Oyo State, although quite linked with Kwara State, and we have noticed increased, banditry work or terrorism work in the likes of Kwara State and Ondo State. And slowly, I remember when we were speaking about the attack in communities in Kayama. I mentioned that Kishi and Igbeti are not far off. And here we are having issues with Kishi and Igbeti already, places in Oyo State.
You see, before the security can be fully enhanced, our government must be able to take control of the forest. And because where it is very easy for you to attack and escape to the forest without being apprehended, then there is definitely room for future attack. If you have been to those routes, especially this Kishi, even from Benin to Kishi, you will see that there are a lot of forest there. So it's very easy for them to come out from the forest, attack, and go back to the forest. So my suggestion is that the government, although the federal government has established the forest guard, but I don't think probably in the next few months or some years, I don't know, it may take its route properly. But as at now, our forests need to be safeguarded. So that is their hidden places.
But when we talk about safeguarding forests, we also know security agents talk about ungoverned areas in those forests. How do we safeguard? How do we protect those places?
Well, you have to employ enough personnel. As at now, the ratios of the security personnel vis-a-vis the population of Nigeria is not enough. That is why, even if it is the productions of intelligence, the state police, establishment police is extremely necessary. Because one, some of them are small hut in those forests. If they are employed locally, even if it is the sharing of intelligence that they are producing, I think there is going to be improvement in the security at churches.
Well, we're just, okay, now, aside the forest now, okay, let me just go to this story that emerged earlier as of this morning. There's another sad news on the rising insecurity in Borno State, as 100 women and children were abducted in Goza town after Wednesday's iftar. Now, this is getting at women and children. We do not know why, or maybe there is a reason that they are specifically targeted women and children. I would not know for now, but maybe we'll break it down. But it was added that many residents were killed by the terrorists in their houses, while over 100 women and children were abducted in the IDPs camp in the area. And report says that the military base in the town had earlier been attacked by the terrorists. And there's another report that says some parts of Niger, Kogi, Yobe, and Bauchi and nearby states are now under the control of the terrorists as residents are running away for safety. Another, different areas to watch out. And then it was also reported again in today's dailies that the federal government paid millions of dollars to the terrorists for the release of many school children abducted recently. A foreign news organization reported it, and the federal government has denied. And, these are some of the latest stories that we have presently. But then, first and foremost, their targets, women and children in that community. Secondly, look at the range of places that they have gotten now. Niger, Yobe, Bauchi, nearby states. Looks like they are gaining territorial control again. And then we're having monies being paid to them. That's you look at this problem and it's looking like we are not even looking at the root of it. It's multifaceted, but we are not addressing it yet.
Yes, you see, as a matter of fact, there's no gainsaying the fact that the government need to sit down, re-examine replanned and re-strategized on the issue of securities of property and personal and citizens. But about the target, normally women when women are children are attacked or they are kidnapped, the sympathy that comes from the populace is higher, quote and unquote, than when mature men are kidnapped, depending on their level.
So is that another
the
strategy?
Status. So it's a strategy that the awareness will go very viral, the fight it will go very wide, and the sympathy from the populace will be higher when it comes to these children and women. And you see, I have said it earlier, that the government have to sit down, because in these situations, as it is going, it's as if we want to go back to where we started. And definitely, it's really worrisome, as I said earlier, where the route that we are talking, Borno, or Adam, all those, they are the same route, and Borno is also very close to Niger, and then they are all burden, they are border areas. So you cannot rule out the possibility of outside criminals also filtrating Nigeria. Because if you go to Borno, you will not know whether this man is a Niger man or is a Nigerian man.
But when we have people infiltrating the country or terrorists coming into the country from broader countries, how do we, this is a conversation we've been having for a very long time.
Yes.
And it has been established, of course, that we have foreigners infiltrating, coming into the country. How do we begin to nip or cut it short? How do we begin to reduce the influx of foreigners? Because at the moment now, we cannot even pinpoint to say people from this national are the ones causing or wreaking this havoc. How do we begin to, especially talking of our borders?
You see, the United States, as big as sophisticated they have in security equipment, when they have problem with Mexico, they erected the wall of Mexico. It's very high and it's very hard to climb. Nigerian border, something they are very, very porous. And then I don't think it is too much if we commence the actions of fencing our borders. Because there are thousands of routes that you can take to enter Nigeria illegally. So that is a threat also, it's a major threat to security.
But also, when we look at attacks on military bases,
yes,
does that not call for major concern, where we have the body we feel or expect to protect the people, to take care of, shield the people from harm, are being attacked, are under siege? Then how do the people gain trust? Who did they put their trust on to say this set of people, this commission, these personnel can actually protect us when their bases are also under attack?
There is no doubt that everybody knows that some military personnel have compromised. Unfortunately, some have been apprehended, exposed, and paraded. Some are found, carrying arms that is rightly allocated to them, to the bandits. You see what happened the other time in Niger, where the arms and ammunitions legally allocated were being illegally transferred or transported to the bandits. You see, as I have said, it's extremely worrisome. We are those who are saddled with the responsibility of protecting the citizens are the same set of people. It's not all. We have those who are working sincerely, very well, within the military and the security the operatives. But there's also, at times, there's also some bad eggs. That's why we suggest that they should reflect those who are saddled with the responsibility of protecting the citizens.
Well, sir, now, we know that there are sabotages. And we know that some of them are being apprehended. We also know that they have been on the chase of some gun runners in different parts of the country. But we also know that the underlying factors to some of these things happening. I fear that perhaps we have been only trying to curb these issues with military use, with the use of force, and not looking at the socio-economic solutions to it, maybe political solutions to it, thereabouts. Maybe it just keeps increasing because we are not considering a more wholesome, solution to it. We are just trying to use security, armed forces, the military, all those terms to try to solve it. Have we even tried to consider using, maybe socio-economic solutions?
Well, I think let me try to paraphrase what you said as this. That we are talking mainly about the cause and effect.
Yes.
This situation is that initially, what are the causes of all this problem? Yes, there are some religion undertones, but it must not lose sight of extreme poverty. It's also a serious threat to security. Mass illiteracy. Some of them, they are in the front of the world. They don't even know what they are fighting for.
Those are some of the
Because
factors
they, because they are serious. I have said because they are mass illiteracy, and that is the issue of poverty. Take us to the issue of economy. Youth left universities, left everywhere, no job. There is nowhere to access long-term loan to start their own business. All those one, they are all economic issues that at times it may get to something that small elements of criminality will just be entering them. And before you know, they have become another thing. Another one is just the proliferation. The other time, the NAFDAC said they banned this more alcoholic something in the sachet something. The way youth of very, very tender age are exposed to drugs also is also worrisome. So all those ones, they are areas that needs government intervention. They say I do hand is a devil's workshop. If the young ones, they are able to be engaged, those who cannot get white collar job, they have access. Some of them, so many youths, they are roaming the street because they have learned one or two trades or one or two, but there's no money to commence such business. The atmosphere should be created so that all those economic intervention and educational intervention should be done without delay.
All right, we'll go on a commercial break now. And when we return, we'll talk about where you stopped now, talking of youth, citizens empowering themselves. We'll be right back. We're still talking about the cases of insecurity that struck this week. But before we went on that break, sir, you were talking about youth having nothing to do, which is most likely what's fueling the insecurity, the rate of insecurity we are currently facing. But we've seen so many people empowering themselves. When we talk about loans, we know federal government provide little loans to people. Yes, it might not get to the volume of people we expect it to get to, but we can also say that federal government is trying as much as it can or to provide the little loan they can provide. But in cases where we do not get the loan or the loan doesn't get to a large number of people, are there ways or what other ways can we empower ourselves to keep us busy, especially to take away the mind of people from perpetrating evil in the society?
Without being sentimental, there is no doubt that the federal government, the present federal government, has a lot of initiatives which aims at empowering the youth. There's interventions in the student loan, student grants. There are also this source of loan.
Yes.
Supposing all the 36 states of the federations also imbibe that culture. You know what I'm saying? Then there's somehow the thing will be absolutely reduced. So the burden should not be placed absolutely on federal government alone. I will want the state also, the state government, to complement the efforts of the federal government in social intervention. I think that if they are able to do that, I think the issue of all these something it will be reduced definitely.
But talking of the responsibilities of states governments now, the state governors, and are we going to see some state governors are handicapped?
They are not handicapped. If they were handicapped, well, they were handicapped before, but not now.
But looking at the insecurity, the rates of insecurity we are currently facing, and especially some of these states where it's on the high, talk of Kogi State, talk of Borno State, and of course we're looking at Nasarawa now. What exactly are we going to say about the governors of those states, and how were they able to allow the rates skyrocket to this extent?
That's what I'm saying about the borders. Border something. If you get to Borno, you can walk from here if you are going, especially in the north, you can walk from here to Akure. Everything is push. You understand what I'm saying? It's not like in our own here, where you get to Kiri, you get up, you get to Ikoyi, you get to Ilesha, you see, you will be still some small towns. So what I'm saying in essence is that the border, that border is a border zone. Niger, Cameroon, you know, it's a border town, and definitely it needs special attention.
Should we start talking about immigration control and maybe a form of identification for you to come into the country? Especially now, we also understand there is freedom of movement. But in a situation where we are facing this high level of insecurity and scores of people are being killed on a daily basis, should we start talking about identification of purpose to come into Nigeria, to come into the country through those borders?
You are talking about the identification for those that come to the country through legal routes. If you have one legal route, there are thousands illegal routes. If you are coming with you have people of questionable character, you don't need to come through the normal route when there's alternatives.
So to mitigate these issues now, shouldn't we be looking at deepening our regional security cooperation, our workings with neighboring countries? I mean, this thing is all over us. We have identified very dangerous spots across our borders. We know where they are easily coming in from. Legally, illegally, we know these areas and we know the issues that are there, but can we work on deepening our relationship with some of these other countries to ensure that, okay, we are going to do this, we are going to take this for a while? I think that we have not looked at, the right policies that would help us curb these issues, stop these issues.
The most important thing is to secure our own territory. One, there is no country, the Nigeria is also interacting and collaborating with also our neighboring countries too. They are not fighting it alone. But we need to devise means to improve our own security architecture within, so that we will be able to, the response teams should be strategically placed in all those areas that we can mark as grade A when it comes to the issues of kidnapping and banditry. And you must not lose the sight of one thing. We cannot say these are the specific groups now that is engaged in battery or kidnapping. Because even armed robbers now, you see that the world's armed robberies, they are almost gone as if they are not existing. Whereas they are existing. Even when they come on the highway, the first perception that people will say is kidnapper, is banditry. Even when they are armed robbers. You get what I'm saying? Whether it is armed robber, whether it is banditry, whether it's kidnappers, they are all threats to security. But you will see that the groups now, we can call it proliferations of groups. So you cannot easily, even where you are working and is this Ansar, is this one, before you know it, just between 1 to 10 people can gather themselves. They have become So there are proliferations of, groups that serve as threat to security, fear, kidnapping,
So,
and banditry.
in your opinion and in your experience, and from what you have seen so far of Nigerian situation, do we think that we are working to stop terrorism, banditry, whatever it is that these guys do, or we're just managing the situation?
And we have seen a lot of efforts of recent.
But those efforts towards managing?
Yes, it's true, it's towards managing. You are seeing the collaborations with the American troops and the sharing of intelligence by both countries also. But you know that, and there is no doubt, it's the Sambisa forest, I would say, they have almost about to take over that forest. The security operations, I can say that. But at the same time, when there is attack in that sort of forest now, the bandits, they are bound to move elsewhere and move. And then there is going to be what they call isolated attack. You know, like the market where you thought they cannot strike, like the mosque where you thought they cannot strike, or church. That is why the author said, when you need to assess the security threat before you engage in certain activities. Some religious leaders, they will call for prayer in the night, right in the almost in the bush. And you know the security personnel, they might have been really far, even if they are distress call before they come on board. So we just urge Nigerians to assess the security threat within or around them before they now say, let us call for night prayer. You can pray anywhere and God will answer. Even if it doesn't the day too, there will be 100 worshippers. All of them will lock themselves inside the church. Before they know, the candidates or the people of this caution, they will meet them inside the church. Right? There's something bad if 20 of them hang up.
So are you saying Nigerians are also not vigilant? Or
I'm not saying they are not vigilant, but I've said that they need to also take in proactive actions. The security of this should not be left absolutely. The other time, which countries are also very close to Adamawa, the villagers, they were able to alert security personnel, and they went there swiftly, and they were able to arrest them. Information is very important when it comes to the issue of security.
And talking of information, what exactly is wrong with our information gathering, our intelligence, that is making this insecurity or these terrorists last as long as they have lasted in Nigeria? Why have we not gotten so much information about, their whereabouts, their activities, and everything surrounding them? But before you answer that question, we have a commercial break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. All right, thank you very much for staying with us. Before we went on that break, so we were talking about intelligence gathering and why has it been difficult for our security to gather so much intelligence, information about the whereabouts, the strategies of these terrorists.
I'm not saying that intelligence is not being shared. I think that there is the paramilitaries or military agencies collaboration is higher now even than before. They share intelligence, they are sharing necessary information. But the point I'm talking is about the villages in Nigeria. If you go to the map of Nigeria, you will see there are some villages that is pretty hard to acquire, as I said the other time. They are bush everywhere. So they need the local people. That's why I personally support the creations of state police. If they will not even be carrying any ammunition or arms or ammunition, even if they are saddled with the responsibility of communicating, alerting, and sharing any useful intelligence from their remote area. Some farmers will be in the farm. If they are part of the security networking, they will share that information from where they are, you know. And the people in authority will be able to know if they strike now, they will either go to the bush or use certain route before they get to the bush, because they go mostly in machine.
Okay. All right. So, an update. Yeah, I know I mentioned the Kishi Betty abduction that happened, and what we are seeing now is an update on the news. Oyo State Police have mentioned something this morning that themselves and a joint security team have rescued 4 abducted passengers along that route. So that follows the synergy that you were talking about. And it has now, what more can we do to enhance the working of this, joint synergy, the collaborations? We have the Amotekun, we have the Nigerian police force. We have a lot of people trying to put hands together. You mentioned the forest guards earlier on when we started, and of course we know they also utilize the forest a lot. What more can we do to enhance the collaboration and the synergy, and it should help them be efficient?
You see, we have to praise the Southwest governments, the state government that fall within the Southwest, for their initiatives in establishing the Amotekun. And I can say that this same Amotekun at times, when there are issues like this, they go to the bush. So that's why I posted to the bush overnight, just in order to make sure that the activities of those operating in the bush also are named in the book. So I will not be surprised if immediately the news came up, they will have, been properly alerted. So we have to praise them if they are able to achieve that. But the most important thing is that information is power. Yes. And if information is not disseminated or timely disseminated, it's useless.
Now, I wanted us to go back to that conversation about community policing. State policing. I remember that we had a conversation with a different guest some time ago, and we were reminiscing on what it used to be. We had, there was this unit then, is it Agbekoya and others?
There was any native authority something.
Yeah. So what happened along the line? Because it used to help secure.
You see, the Yoruba will say that you cannot say because of your fear of death, then you will not sleep. Yes, there is no that in the First Republic. The NA, which are the local, they call the native authority. The NA, they use, that's what they call it, you will see them with kondo, that is small, big stick like this, which they use. So they were politically used and politically manipulated, and they use them to oppress political opponents. So that's why some people are really apprehensive that if you have the state police now under the control of the state governor or something like that, will it not be misused? But I am of the opinion that we must have learned certain lessons since that time till now, that we should be able to put average legislations and guidelines that will take care of such things. But definitely, the first question is, the current positions or the numbers of security personnel in Nigerians, is it adequate? The question is no. If it is not adequate, what are the solutions? And what type of solution? The type of solution we need now is those that will be able to ensure peace in our villages, the remote villages and towns. Definitely, we need community policing. So whether if we don't want to call it police, we say policing.
So that's questions about our security architecture, the way our security is structured in the country.
Yes.
You think we're not managing it properly?
No, you see, there is nothing, the security architecture is dynamic. It's not static. You hear what I'm saying? It evolves with time. When you have certain things now, if other things is happening, you just oppose it. You hear what I'm saying? And build it again into the security architectures of the state. You move like this, so it's not static. It's dynamic. Also, it should be dynamic.
When we have people being kidnapped in their numbers, we saw what happened sometimes last year where school children are kidnapped, and there were issues surrounding, or there were talks surrounding whether the federal government paid ransom or not. Also, when the church attack happened in Kwara State and Kogi State at some point, and they were released after a while. When we have questions surrounding ransom and human lives are involved, are government expected to pay ransom for the release of citizens?
Well, the present government at the federal level has even criminalized paying ransom. So, if you pay it, if you receive it, if you do this, all those they said they are part of the terrorist groups. But you look at as a situation where somebody's husband or somebody's wife has been kidnapped. You know, the husband or the wife, in whichever cases, bear the agony, or somebody's child, son or daughter, the father or the parent bear the agony more than the government will think about it, more than the government. And the way you will think, if the government say don't pay, if you ask money to pay, if you even go through any legal means to go and pay. You get what I'm saying? Because he feels the pain more than any other person. So that's why it's also very difficult to, when you outlaw it, when you say it is legal, when you raise punishment for it, people will still engage in it because it touches them more than any other person. So, but as at now, from the little knowledge I have, I think paying ransom it has been criminalized. So if government now engage in it, and there is, unfortunately, we have not seen evidence to show it, because it's also speculation.
Okay, but what do we say about the lives of people at stake, where we have these terrorists, claiming or saying they will not be released until ransom are being paid? And we've seen instances where, they are killed one after the other, or people are being killed even when ransom are paid, and sometimes even when they are not paid, they say we give you so time, and people are being killed.
You see?
How do we deal with such trauma? How do we deal with such agony and such thoughts, considering the fact that the federal government has also criminalized, paying of ransom?
We must not lose the sight of the fact that when groups want to undermine the government of the day, they want it to look as if they are nothing, as if they want to incite the citizens against the state. They engage in such activities. You will see them that they even they be slaughtering small guys, youths, the wife of somebody, the mother of somebody, and they will be filming it, so that everybody will say, this government is bad, this government is so. That is the aim. So that is it's very unfortunate that when people, what people do with power, how people search for power, is also disturbing. They can slaughter a whole community, so that people will say that we know that the government is not doing its primary responsibility of providing security for the citizenry.
Both things. We cannot deny that one of the first few things we would look for in any government is how to protect their own. And sometimes it looks like communication is not helpful in protection. Why am I saying this? Recently, we saw a viral clip. A copper, presently in the NYSC, was shown live, being maltreated, assaulted. All forms of despicable evil was done, and we saw it all. But then there has been no statements whatsoever. Now, some people went back to something that trended back then, where in the handbook, something was written for those who are just getting into the NYSC system about how they'll protect themselves if they get kidnapped. And, people start to ask the question, why are we not looking at, okay, let's even look at a way to safeguard everyone in the first place, not to put them even at any risk of falling into the hands of bandits or kidnappers and all of that evil that we are presently experiencing in the country. I would have thought that we would have looked for contingency plans to at least, okay, until when this whole rising insecurity is curbed or reduced, this is what we are going to do with the NYSC program. This is what is happening with the prospective corpers. This is what is happening with the corp members that we have presently. Why are we not doing all of this? Why are we just still putting people at risk? Because people are still seeing their, their call-up letters, and they're still seeing some certain states that have been affected in the call-up letters. And they have to report to camp first and foremost.
Well, whether the issue of youth corps, as those who establish it, does it not go on? They just look at where institutions where all Nigerians will be able to be used to other culture, you know. And but if you are to overstay this assistance, they can review it. But the issue of threats to lives and properties of Nigerians is not restricted to NYC camp alone. We have seen a situation in Maiduguri where students who are expected, as university students who are expected to be enlightening the other community, are even engaged in collaboration with these kidnapping activities, sharing vital information about the movement of troops to the bandits. So the problem is that it's not about even the elite in the society, the educated element in the society. If you look at the issue of the Boko Haram, if you see some of them speaking, if you see the curriculum vitae of many of them, they were well educated. You know what I'm saying? So it's a serious menace that has penetrated.
And this brings me to the question I asked earlier. I mentioned monarchs and community leaders.
Yes, I didn't exaggerate them.
Being informants, not protecting, working with these terrorists. And now you're also talking about the elite amongst them, working with criminals, working with terrorists. When we have people like these who have been caught at some point, who have been identified at some point, should there not be stringent measures, maybe a legislation being passed, maybe when they are apprehended, they take them straight, and we do not delay the processing. And talking of going through the, letting the law take its course, and making examples of such people for future reference.
I don't think they are exonerating them. If they are caught, some of them that have been caught, some have been, I think charged. The case is pending in the court. You see, the issue of the blood, it's the same blood we have that is in everybody, but some are criminally minded. It doesn't matter whether you are in the pulpit preaching every Sunday or you are in the mosque, with sermons every Friday. It does not take away some people's criminality. They will leave that sermons or that preachings and go back to where they want to do their criminal something. You have seen issues of pastors involved in the sharing of arms and ammunition to the bandits. You have seen the old aged parent mother, posing as mad people to go and deliver the ammunition to the bandits. The mother, who are expected to be sympathetic, So the society has been so. The Nigerian society is a terrible society now, and the things that are coming out, they are also product of the society. It's very unfortunate, but I'm really optimistic that we shall resolve it.
All right, thank you very much for the optimism about resolving this all. We've been in conversation with our very first guest on today's topic, that's rising insecurity, ISWAP's attacks on Yobe markets and Borno military bases. And yes, our daddy, Fatai Akinsomi, legal practitioner and retired intelligence officer, has been serving us from his depth and wealth of knowledge. Thank you very much for coming.
My brother, thank you. And my sister, too.
You're welcome.
All right, so we go on a short break. When we return, our second guest will be right on seat with us to continue the conversation.
Thank you very much for staying with us. We have a second guest in the studio with us this morning, still talking about insecurity in Nigeria. We have Mr. Olufemi Adenito. He's a legal practitioner and a conflict governance expert. You're welcome.
Hi, thank you.
It's good to have you. Let's look at it before we look at it from the legal aspect now or standpoint. On Wednesday, the Inspector General of Police, Tunji Disu, inaugurated an 8-member committee to oversee the implementation of state police and the rollout of his policing vision, following his confirmation as the 23rd Indigenous IGP. Looking at that policing, the committee, the structure, and of course, the insecurity fallout we've been having in Nigeria, what's the expectation, or what should we be expecting from the committee?
All right, so it's very good news. At least we now have like a new IGP. What it tells us is that there are possibility that there might be increase in security governance across board, because in the previous years we've not really had it very good because it's been one attack or the other. So with the new Inspector General of Police, at least it gives us kinds of assurance that something new might be awaiting in terms of the security governance system architecture in Nigeria. So yes, it's been long envisaged that there must be a strategic effort in order to reorganize the structure of the whole security apparatus of the country, and it has to work in synergy with various other military formations, because of course we all do understand that the military itself, they are really on the forefront of trying to bring lasting peace across the region. Now, my own concern would now be about how more involved would the police be in terms of, because we know that in the Sahel region, the Lake Chad area, that's where we do have the infiltrations of the said terrorists particularly, and it's been very easy for them to move from the Lake Chad region to the southern part of the country. So what also concerns also might arise or might come to our mind, what are also the efforts by the Nigerian police in terms of working in coordination with those Lake Chad regions, right? Those states, to ensure that through which, of course, do have the Lake Chad Basin Corporation, of course, ensuring that they securitize their border, right? Because if it's not just enough for Nigeria to protect its own border, but to also ensure that we work in synergy with other regions in the Sahel to make that place safe. So that, yeah.
I was going to ask you now, because, involving the police means something more being done on collaboration.
Yeah.
And as a conflict governance expert, what do you rate the collaboration between, armed forces, the military units, security personnel?
Yeah, good question there. When you look at it, well, you could, because we can only evaluate the success of every system by its past, right? And to see about what has it been doing in terms of addressing issues we've seen, because this kind of conflict we've been experiencing is what we call the asymmetric pattern, guerrilla warfare, right? So it's very new, in fact, to every country, right? It's very new. But in rating, right, you will rate one by the past effort in addressing the conflict, you've seen the escalating patterns of how the security has increased, the trend analysis, right? So we've been seeing from the Chibok girls getting kidnapped, we now saw Dapchi. From there, we've been seeing, even recently was in Niger, where we saw the abduction of school children, right? So it has also been increasing, right? So we've seen also the change of pattern and the new forms of groups, right? It used to be Boko Haram, now it is now ISWAP, right? So we have even the Lakwarawa, the different segments, and we also have the Fulani militias, several pockets of group, splitter group keep coming up. Now, the question would be, how then do you rate a system that has maybe led to the birth of further new groups, right? So the question to ask is that, or the concerns now to answer that will now be that if it has been that successive governance system being put in place have not properly checked, or we've seen the escalating patterns or the incremental form, then we will say that the security system needs to rework itself or needs to change the strategy. And like I said, this is an asymmetric pattern of warfare, which is even very new. Remember that even in the Middle East, where we have various forms of groups where this all is an offshoot of what we are seeing now, because terrorism generally is global, right? It's across board, and we also see that they have various network or links with other global international frameworks. Right?
Okay, but when you say we need a new form of strategy, or security need new form of strategy, does it mean we've been on a particular strategy over the years, or our intelligence system has just failed in terms of informants and information gathering?
Well, in terms of the information or the intelligence pattern, right? I believe that Nigeria do have that enabling technology. In fact, the intelligence is required, right? And I also feel that issues around terrorism is a very complex thing, right? And part of it, so many things that happen behind the scene, we are not privy to that kind of information. For instance, the government will have those kind of more detailed response. But the approach that we've seen so far, what we see is that there have been efforts, but they've not been much. The effort has not really yielded much expectations. Because looking back to the Constitution, right, which provides that, especially for Section 14, that gives the right of the state to ensure that it protects the life welfare of its citizenry, right? So the question to ask is that what is the primary responsibility of governance, right? If its primary role is not being performed effectively. So yes, you again go back to the initial question you asked. There've not been much success in terms of the citizens' trust in the government being able to fix the security challenges. So the way forward, if you are looking at it at a tangential level, will be for the government, for instance, to now restore trust, work in collaboration, In fact, it should even be I will call it even cross-sectoral process, where all the agency of the government, working even with the citizens as well, communities, must identify and spot out these groups and address the issues we are having.
Trust me, I have questions on how they'll be able to achieve that. Because first and foremost, not a lot of people are impressed with our security infrastructure, our architecture security-wise. That's the first port of call. Secondly, there are some certain parts of the country that people feel like I told the previous guest and asked a question about it, the NYSC program, for instance. We have people leaving university. First off, it's a bleak feature with the way the country is run. Secondly, you have a one-year program that they have to travel to different parts of the country. We understand the initial aim, but is it still achieving that aim? One. Two, in light of the spate of kidnapping, banditry, terrorism attacks, we are still sending some of our youth, the future of the country, to high-risk areas, high-risk states. Begs the question again. We saw recently, okay, before I mention that, last year, and I'm going to say this with something in my mind now. Last year, Someone decried the state of the NYC program.
Yeah.
She was in that program. And we saw the backlash that followed from the NYC. This same NYC program has someone whose image is trended not too long ago because he was being assaulted, manhandled by terrorists.
Yeah.
And we have not seen any statement. We have not seen anything to talk about it. In the handbook, it says something about protecting yourself when traveling. And we know that it is so hot. Even in the southwestern areas, there's so much problem. What areas can they actively start working on to ensure that people start to gain trust? Because there's no way people would see the NYC program and those videos that we have seen, and the children seeing their call-up letters, taking them to high-risk states, and start believing that they can still trust the system.
Yeah, good. Victor, it's a good analogy you've painted, or the explanation. But you see, another thing that will come is that when a system, especially when trust is being, trust is collapsed, it takes a long process to rebuild, right? And that's why it's always good, whether in our own personal life, we always have to ensure that trust must be there. Now going back, scaling it up now to this, at this kind of level, it's always boils down to the leadership, right? So remember, it was Chinua Achebe who said the trouble with Nigerian country, the trouble with our country boils down to the leadership, right? So at the leadership level, which is from the center, the government must ensure that they begin to match words with actions, right? So once that is done, that process is done, it gives the citizens an assurance that, yes, the government means this and they're acting on it. Now, but if you are saying we are doing something, we are trying to address an issue, for instance, a citizen makes a report about certain thing, the government there should be a system that should swift into action to address that issue rather than making it, rather than creating that gap or that loop that makes us to feel that the government is not a kind of a trustworthy kind of system, right? So again, when I look at these whole issues around the previous effort and what people feel about how the government has been perhaps managing the security. So again, when you see, going back to what you said, when citizens point out something, they become the victim, right? So how do you move away from not being a victim of making a report of certain, maybe certain issues or challenges in the system, than becoming a victim? So you must really distinguish between that and ensure that the government must perhaps do the right thing or do its system, put the structure in place that makes, once anyone maybe goes against or contravenes what is expected of it, then the punishment are meted.
Are we being purposeful?
Are we being what?
Are we being purposeful in solving this problem?
The purpose is there, right? But again, like I said, proud to now, like I usually like to look at it in this way. All we've seen basically it has been statements by the government. We've addressed this, we've addressed that. We've not seen it being matched with action. But I think from the recent tweet by President Donald Trump, you saw that there was a change in the whole effort to address the security, right? To address especially terrorism. Because from the tweet, you saw that America started having interest. Because remember, terrorism is a very complex one. And if you don't address it, you say it's because it's happening in far north or it's in northeast, and say it's not because we are not in the west. Remember, we are still having issues around kidnapping, and even in the southwest. Kogi State is there now, having its own issue. Kwara is having its issue. It's getting close now. So,
I mean, it's not even a matter of getting close. Just yesterday was reported that people were kidnapped in Kishi Igbeti Road, along Kishi Igbeti Road. And of course, this morning we heard reports that 4 of them have been released, where they've been rescued. But away from that, or not entirely away from that, when we look at the trajectory of these attacks, and we look at how it's coming down, in fact, it is not coming down anymore. We are seeing it in the southwest now. We've seen reports, and this Kishi Igbeti is not going to be the first. How do we begin to talk about the security architecture of the Southwest And of course, we are also having other states in consideration. Few months ago, we had the Southwest governors come together to talk about Security Trust Fund.
Yeah.
How does this help protect the people in terms of security? But before you answer that question, we have a commercial break and we'll be right back. Please. Thank you very much for staying with us. We still have Barrister Olufemi Adenitan here in the studio, who's been talking to us from the governance standpoint now of insecurity. But before we went on that break, I was asking about the Southwest Security Trust Fund that was established a few months ago by Southwest governors, looking at the influx or the cases we've been hearing. I mean, we've heard of Ondo now, we've heard of Oyo State,
yeah.
and it's been happening.
Yeah, it's a pattern, right?
It's becoming a pattern. What has the trust fund, Southwest Security Trust Fund, what does it have to do? How does it have to protect the people? And what is the expectation regarding that particular structure?
All right, so good question. Yes, the Southwest Development Trust Fund perhaps should be maybe in terms of investment in technology to address the conflict, because what we've seen is that the security situation in the Southwest has deteriorated. Looking at we just saw the Betty case you just gave, also begs the question that what has this fund or this institution, what have they done in terms of ensuring that this does not happen again? Because that's the kind of pattern we saw in the northeast part of the country, where we saw one attack. If you don't put a structure in place to prevent further ones, then you will see the patterns keep on moving forward, right? So the government perhaps should go into IT information, looking at in terms of drone technology, AI, to ensure that we get experts in place where we have a surveillance across the Southwest, and it has to be investment technology. The way the world has moved now, it's not the way it used to be, right? So everything is based on technology. Looking at the case of, could you see the conflict in Iran and in the Israel? Middle East. What are they using? Technology, shooting of rocket launchers and all of that. The world is not going into more about foot soldier or getting those locomotive guns and all of that to the bushes, right? So you must put maps of surveillance systems in place, invest in technology, bring in the best brains who understand these things, bring them into it, take away politics from security, take away politics from governance.
You think it can happen?
Yes, you think it can happen. So the government should, because whoever is listening now, they should, because it's, especially in the Southwest, you must continue to do the right thing at this point now, because it's still very early to prevent it than to see the patterns of what we've witnessed in Bono, in Yobe, where it's been from one kidnapping, from adoption, parading school, you see suicide bombing, all these things, and it shows that it tells us generally that our security system is weak. Remember, even once it's begin to happen, then it starts creating panic, fear, and that is usually the modus of operations of most of these terrorist groups, right? What do they really want? They want to create fear. They want to show the society that the government is incapable. Sometimes they launch their attacks on military formations, their base, just to pick their arms and ammunition, and that's how they regroup. They recruit more people. And again, we must also not forget issues around poverty, lack of education, and this has all been a multidimensional process that has always led to this whole insecurity we have seen, right?
I was actually going into that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that sometimes we are not stopping to think of going away from just using military solutions to stop whatever it is that we are trying to stop, if there's a purpose to it anyways. I think that we have not looked at how to stop them increasing their numbers from the grassroots.
Yeah.
Take, for example, now, what's our work done on the victims of these attacks?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for some of them to want to get on with retaliation. If, for example, now, circa 2012, 2013, 2014, down to 2017, some people had their families, involved in, this brutality. And then nobody catered to them. But they have seen the same people who perpetrated the evil on their loved ones being rehabilitated with taxpayers' money, being brought back into the system, being put in the military. You know, it could be easily bought into you know, perpetrating evil himself. And you know, these are the things that we have not worked on.
Yeah, so of course we have the plan of the government, particularly is kinetic and non-kinetic approach, right? So kinetic is using of arsenals, military formation, go to face the terrorists head on and eliminate them, right? So that is usually for the kinetic. For the non-kinetics, you use that as well. You talk about rehabilitation program. You look at the reason why some of these things will happen in the first instance, right? And that is where I think it has to be an integration of the two, right? So because if you tell someone who has not eaten for 3 days, 1 week, or cannot feed himself, and you say you don't expect that person to join certain kind of criminal gangs, right? Because that's the way it usually starts, then it becomes a problem. So remember that for you to even address anything first, in terms of looking at the projection of the future forward, the government must ensure that there is a process, a welfare package in place towards identifying those vulnerable persons in the society, meeting their needs genuinely, and don't play politics with humanitarian intervention, right? Over the years, my work has always revolved around humanitarian intervention and ensuring that there's no politics in international humanitarian intervention. It has to be that when you notice that, for instance, now you go on the streets of Iwo Road in several parts of, or even on your state, you see a lot of vulnerable persons. So what does it tell people? A lot of these kids have not eaten, right? So it's very easy for you to recruit this kind of people and bring them into any kind of group. And of course, it's very easy to make them to always change their minds towards seeing the state as the cause of their problem, right? So when you do this, you ensure that first, education, right? One of the reasons why a lot of these groups are increasing in their numbers is lack of education, because it's easy for them to be brainwashed, to tell them that, oh, you could do this, you can. When you join this group, this is, for instance, you get certain, I think there's I don't know if that's true, that you get certain virgins in when you go to heaven, right? So these are the kinds of brainwashing that many times the youths, some of these vulnerable persons are being sold to, right? And another thing again will be hunger, right? The goal one of the United Nations SDG goals, right? We're talking about zero poverty. We don't want poverty. We don't want hunger. Goal 16, perhaps, strong institution, peace and prosperity. For you to do this, you must ensure that other goals has been addressed, right? So the effort particularly must be centered on how can the government try to prevent this from even happening in the first instance. For instance, in the society like in America now, in UK, right, it would be very rare for you to find someone who go into criminality because they are really hungry. Because the system, especially in the Nordic regions, right, where you find that there's a welfare package in place. If you don't have food, there's a food bank. You can go there, access food. If you don't have homes, the government will provide you shelter, right? So those rough sleepers, people, you see them sleeping under the bridge, right? And it's very easy for you to recruit these guys and bring them on board. So this must also be addressed so that this group don't increase in their numbers. And trust me, there are developmental funds that has been, it's been for ages now, right? The international partners do send funds to the government, sometimes implement it through various CSO. Where do these funds usually go to, right? So it's another thing again to start rethinking on how, for you to really address issues of conflict, right, you have to prevent it from to start in the first instance, right? So if you prevent conflict from starting, then you would now deal with those ones that are already recruited, right? So you get those guys who are already in the business of conflict, engage them, then give them a time to surrender and to be integrated, because you can't continue to allow this group to continue to remain in existence.
So when you say they surrender, I think we should now start talking about the law. When we say they surrender, what about the activities, the people they have killed? What does the law say about someone who kills another person and has been found guilty of such acts?
Yes, of course, there's a death penalty for that, right?
So okay, yeah. So when we have that already in the law, why do we keep talking about a repentant terrorist?
We have to say repentant terrorist because, like I said, remember, you must always look at the drivers for conflict, right? So, because this is more a more technical terms, right? You must always look at the drivers of conflict, the structural reasons why people even engage in conflict in the first instance.
But don't you think if you have committed a crime, then you should serve the time?
Well, some people might, because I've done some research, especially in the Lake Chad region of Nigeria, where you see that a lot of people will say that the reason why I decide to go into this crime or this criminality is because I was attacked, the government did not do anything. For instance, you would be speaking with this particular group of a group of people to say, especially even if you speak with the Fulani group, so say, well, my cattle was rustled, I reported to the police did not do anything, they left me to my plight, I'm suffering, I can't feed myself, my family is there, then the only option I have is to see how to go through the route of. So again, you must prevent that from happening, and you must understand that some of these people that even go into crime, they may have done that out of frustration, right? So,
is there really an excuse? Because when we keep making excuses for them, then how do we bring succor to the families of the slain victims?
So the slain victims, again, it's very painful, right? If you say you want to go into one approach in addressing the conflict, sometimes it don't usually end well because it's going to be, oh, this is where you want it, then let's go heads on. So what happened is that, don't forget that those people who are also victims of that, who are members of this terrorist group, they are also Nigerians before they became part of the network of this group, right? So again, while we will say it's not good for you to just allow these guys these criminal gangs, for them to be given an amnesty and be integrated back into society, we must also watch that. We must also try to prevent this from even happening. That's number one. And again, if you say you want to put the maximum punishment of the law on them in every cases, so what's the implication is that many of them will say, oh, this is the way you want it, then they will continue to generate. Remember, many of these groups are even within us as society. You will be surprised that they're already in this Southwest. They are part of, is a guerrilla kind of a thing. They are part of the system. So how then do you make them to realize that, okay, these are your issues, right? You address them while you are actively combating those ones who are unrepentant.
And now here is where it gets tricky. When we say repentant bandits, repentant terrorists, they repented, you brought them back. You reintegrate them back into the society. What gives us the assurance they are not going back? In fact, as a matter of fact, they actually go back. Some of them go back into the crime. And then they talk about repenting again. You bring them back into the fold. At what point does it end? And then how does that also not mean that we do not place value on human lives?
No, we do. Remember, there's this, I was part of an high-level United Nations course. It's called Disarmament, Integration and Remobilization and Integration. Usually it's called DDRO, right? So usually even if you saw the civil war in various parts of the South, West Africa, even in Libya, Sierra Leone, all of that, where we saw issues of child soldiers and rebel groups coming up. How do the United Nations usually go in addressing this, bringing lasting peace in this environment? So they employ DDRO, right? That's disarmament, integration process, and return. Sometimes you put the third arrow, which is you have to return those groups back, you integrate them, you teach them skills and all of that, because most times they don't have options, right? That's when they engage in criminality in the first instance, right? So that's one. This is how it is.
I really would not agree with you.
Okay.
When you say they do not have options,
so
the next option is to kill other people. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying now is that, well, when you want to address it both in kinetic and non-kinetic, or do you just want to address it non-kinetic, just face them heads on? How then do you even identify this group in the first instance? No one, unless in some parts where you find them maybe in the Sambisa forest, right? Those where you say, okay, you could take the fight to them heads on. What about those ones who are part of the communities, local communities?
What about those ones who are not part of the community? Now, we've heard some state governors. I remember sometimes last year when the governor of Governor Muswang
Yeah, most
of
one.
Plateau State,
Yeah.
and of course also of Benue State, came out to say, we know these people, we know where they are. So if you know them, why are you not going after them? That's the question.
So that is where it comes about leadership with the right actions, right? So remember what I said, everything has to be done simultaneously. It does not have to be a regional thing. It has to be from the center. If you are addressing the conflict, you give it a timeline. Between this period, 6 months, I want to address the conflict. The president match his word with action, deploy intelligence, drones and all of that. They move across all the states, secure the Sahel region, ensure that no moving of anybody, no going out. America did that in terms of illegal migrants coming into America, right? They've now blocked all channels, so people are not coming in. No illegal migrants are coming through to the road anymore, right? So what have they now done is that the government can also do this, deploy drones across surveillance system across the state. Give the groups a time. Within this X period, I want you to surrender your arms. And those who know you want to be integrated, you want to be rehabilitated, I will provide you rehabilitation. Now, if you don't, then it's going to be, the fight is going to be heads-on on them. So that's the way why you have to follow, right?
Well, it will be hard for many people to agree to that anyways, because of what has been. But let's talk about something you mentioned earlier on, the business of conflict. Some people call it a conflict economy.
Yeah.
Yourself and the previous guests have both, at different times during this conversation, spoken some lines, which tends to point out that there are people who thrive on having these criminals, the terrorists and the bandits, the kidnappers, around wherever they are based in. Take, for example, now, the previous guest mentioned some women who disguise as mad women to transport ammunition for these bandits and terrorists. We know in some areas, some people will sell food and everything to people who are known terrorists, who have taken charge of their communities and sell information to them as well, just because they gain extra money. How do we address that problem? Because it's one part of looking at those who carry the guns as the criminals.
Yeah.
It's another part to know that, I thought there was a word aiding and abetting.
Yeah.
But then we are looking at some people who do this business and we are not even looking at them as criminals.
So again, that goes back to your question. I think you've answered even the first leg of the second leg of the question where she was asking, why do you think that someone who disguised as a mad person would even want to do that in the first instance? Maybe the person, that's the only option in terms of food, right? In terms of they don't have a place to stay.
Or being greedy.
But if you're also being greedy, there must also be various factors. That's why I said it's always the state have the responsibility to protect lives and property and the welfare of the people. And also in terms of the education of its citizenry, the state, if you look at down from the chapter 12 of the Constitution, you see that there's a whole lot of responsibility that is being placed on the state in terms of providing welfare, providing even in terms of the young persons, ensuring that they have access to education. All these things are responsibility that the state is supposed to be working on. Now you now talk about the aspect of someone disguising himself as being this and that. Why would someone want to do that if they don't have anything, maybe perhaps food, there's no, that's the only source of their reliance, right? So you cannot pick one and choose one. It has to be a collective and a decisive process that must be taken. And again, it has to be with a timeline. Remember, I told you, everything you do in life must be within a timeline to address it. I give you within 3 months, we want to address conflict. The government should roll out the plan. It may not be something that may be available to the public, but it must be within the security systems to ensure that within this timeline, this is what they are going to do, deployment of technology, sharing of intelligence, working in collaboration with civil military relations, ensuring that they go straight to the nooks and crannies of where these groups are, give them time to surrender, identify them, fight them, work in collaboration with other, the sister agency, and even the Lake Chad Basin Corporation. They must be also be positioned to put their police in terms of in that area, in that borders, so that we don't see infiltration of this group keep coming into into Nigeria or into various places of the country. But if you say we want to protect security just alone for Southwest, then what happens in Kwara? What happens in Benin? What happened in... so how do you now be able to check that? So if you are safe, so like I said, why is America even interested in terrorism, addressing terrorism? Because you know that terrorism is a global phenomenon. If you say because you are in America, then what happened in Iraq or Afghanistan does not concern. Very soon, it's just a matter of time. It will spill over. And by the time it spills over, then it becomes a big problem for the states, right?
All right. I would like to say a big thank you to you, Barrister Olufemi Adeniton, a legal practitioner and conflict governance expert. On behalf of the entire production crew of AM120, this morning I would say thank you very much for sharing from your wealth of experience and knowledge with us right here on the conversation, rising insecurity, ISWAP's attacks on Yobe market and Borno military bases. Of course, other places that we have discussed this morning. We hope that next time we'll keep calling, you will give us a favorable response.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, up next is the sports segment. And yes, we have Toby Ajewale waiting in line to serve us some more stories from the ever exciting world of sports.
All right, thanks to Toby Ajewale for that sport update. And that's much we have for you on this week's edition of AM 120. Yes, it's the weekend. Whatever it is you do, make sure you stay safe. And of course, be security conscious. When you see something, make sure you speak up. I am Oluwa Fumbi Bello. Have a nice weekend.
And I am Victor Opone, reminding you to put a smile on someone's face. It is very necessary in light of everything the world is facing. I am Victor Opone, say my BYE this time around.